I want to just take this time to introduce myself. My name is Father Chris Emminger. I've been ordained for 2 weeks now, and so I'm beginning to... thank you. So I'm beginning to learn everything that they can't teach you at seminary. The beginning of the liturgy was, make sure your microphone is on at the start of Mass. Today, if it wasn't for today being the 27th Sunday in Ordinary Time, we'd be celebrating the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, the one who heard the words from heaven saying, "Francis, go rebuild my church, which as you see has fallen into disrepair." He went and rebuilt the church in Assisi, only to discover his vocation was further than simply brick and mortar. And he went and formed the Franciscan order, and truly was a great reformer of the church. We speak him as a true reformer because of the fruits that his ministry bore, and the fruits of the laborer which were planted by the Master is what we see both from the prophet Isaiah and the Gospel of Matthew. First, in Isaiah, previous to this point, the prophet had been telling the people, "Turn away from your pride and turn toward the common good." Now we see him offer a song where he speaks of a friend. The friend did everything that they could to guarantee a good harvest. They chose good land. They cleared the stone. They built a watchtower. This friend was so confident that the vineyard would produce wine that the friend installed a wine press with that great anticipation of the harvest which is to come. And yet, no grapes grew other than wild grapes. God gives people everything to their advantage that they may produce fruit, but just because we have been given everything does not guarantee that we will respond accordingly. And the question is posed to us, which was posed by the prophet Isaiah. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I had not done? Jesus picks up on this vineyard imagery in the gospel. It's a continuation of last week's gospel, where Jesus was rebuking the religious leaders at the time. When last week we heard the parable of the two sons. One told his father he would not do his will and did it. The other said he would do his will and did not do it. And now Jesus is further elaborating upon that with the imagery of the landowner and the tenants. The tenants were acting, at minimum, we can say, irrationally, because they were seizing those who were sent to get what was due them. This was a common economic model during that period of the first century, where absentee landowners would hire sharecroppers to produce the harvest, and when harvest time came, the landowner was the first one to be paid. And yet the tenants, when the servants are sent, kill them. Then the landowner says, "Well, I will send my son. They will respect him." And what happens? They kill him too. And they tell him, "Let us kill him because then we're going to get his inheritance." That's not how it worked back then. Simply by killing the son, you don't acquire the landowner's inheritance. Furthermore, the landowner is still alive when they're making this plan. What's going on among the people? What's this imagery that Jesus is stressing? Clearly, the vineyard is Israel, the landowner is God. The first servants were the prophets who spoke, and the Son is truly the Son of God. Those who were rejected that were sent by the Father. And now the Father is going to put those wicked tenants to death. Yet even when he puts the tenants to death, we see the mercy of God come through. Because in the first reading, when the vineyard did not produce fruit, Isaiah spoke of destroying the whole vineyard. In the gospel, when after the tenants committed these wicked deeds, the response was not destroy the vineyard. The response was put to justice those who did evil. who refused to do the will of the Heavenly Father, those who did not respond to the gospel accordingly. Because last week we heard it is not enough simply to say the right things. They also have to have the corresponding action. So today Christ again reiterates, they will know your action, and if you are a follower of God, by the fruits that it bears in your life. But how are we to bear these fruits? St. Paul juxtaposes worrying versus prayer, because he says prayer and service are what lead to true peace. The tenants did not wake up one day thinking, if we put all of these people to death, then things will get better. But they likely woke up thinking, I could have more money, more status, more power. I can have more influence if I become like the landowner and put to death all that he has sent me. They were drawn to the things of this world, and they stopped thinking about the generosity of the landowner, and they desired to take things into their own hands. These tenants fell to the sin of pride because they did not allow themselves to work as the landowner had asked them to, and they crushed the seed of life which had been planted into their hearts. And it would be very easy for us to say, well, that's the tenants. We are not them. We understand who our Heavenly Father sent us, and yet there are moments when we too fall to the sin of pride, when we hinder the harvest in our life. The hedge which was built to keep the animals out, we go beyond that. We seek of going further beyond the law out of abundant curiosity. The watchtower, which was supposed to provide shelter and protection for us, the great tradition of the church, we try to avoid, lest it see us acting inappropriately or out of the ways of how we ought to conduct ourselves. The winepress, which was built in anticipation for the harvest, we take that for granted too. We tell ourselves, of course we will be saved. Of course we will gain everything that our Heavenly Father had promised us. Therefore, we do not need to respond accordingly, because we are so confident that we simply then turn to the sin of sloth. Like the religious leaders at the time of Christ, we assume to know the will of God, so we stop coming to Him in prayer and discernment, which hinders our ability to truly respond to the gospel message. I began today speaking about one Francis. I will end with another. Pope Francis said, faith in God asks us to renew every day the choice of good over evil, the choice of truth over lies, the choice of love of our neighbor over selfishness. We go forward in prayer responding to the will of our Heavenly Father so that His fruit may be born in our life. The fruit of love, the fruit of mercy, the fruit of compassion, and yes, the fruit of justice as we work towards right relationship with God and one another.